Looking to buy a new home in 2025? Are you a first-time home buyer, or maybe you just haven't purchased a house in a while? What's changed? What do you need to know? And how are we going to get you into your new home in 2025? Let's get into it. So really, home buying is just a series of steps, and it's a process. Just like any other thing that's out there, you have to follow the process in order to get to the end result that you want to get to, which in this case is purchasing a home. So I always start at the number one spot, which is know your credit scores. Now, the reason it's important to know your credit score, and let's just be frank, let's be honest, if you have a credit score less than 620, there's a better than average chance that you're going to have a harder time qualifying for a mortgage. Doesn't mean you're a bad person. Doesn't mean that it's not possible. It just means you're going to have a more difficult time qualifying for the mortgage. So it doesn't really matter all the other moving parts. If the credit score is low, it's going to make everything else difficult. Now, there's tons of apps out there, Experian, MyFICO, tons of apps out there that you can use to help track your FICO score. And honestly, there's programs out there for people with less than perfect credit that would allow them to qualify for a mortgage. There's government-backed loans like FHA loans, USDA loans, VA loans, those type of loans that are designed by the government and can help those who have less than perfect credit get into a mortgage. So that's more of a mortgage question, but the reality is know your credit score so that way you can go down to step 2. Let's assume you have that 620 or higher credit score. You're going to jump to step 2. Let's talk about it. So there's a reason it's a process, and the reason why step 2 comes after step 1 is step 1, know your scores. Step 2, let's go out and find you a quality loan officer. So my personal suggestion is go out and find a mortgage broker. Now, I've done business with large banks. My personal loan came from Rocket Mortgage. I've done business with those folks, and I will tell you they do a great job. I prefer working with mortgage brokers because a mortgage broker may have a bucket of different, or toolbox. Toolbox is a better word for it. They may have a toolbox full of programs that may be able to work for you individually, as opposed to programs that are designed strictly for specific loans or qualifications. So it's important for you to go out and get pre-qualified and then get pre-approved. So there's a difference in a pre-qualification and a pre-approval. So a pre-qualification is when you are qualified to do something. So basically what I'm saying there is that you go in, you fill out some paperwork, you get a little bit of information in there, and now you are qualified to purchase a home. But just because you're qualified to purchase a home doesn't necessarily mean that you're approved to purchase a home yet. So here's why that's important is what the pre-approval is basically saying is all the information that the bank needs or that the mortgage folks need to get you approved to purchase a home, they now have in place. And they're saying unless something funky happens, that you should be able to purchase that home. So remember, always go for the pre-approval. Just because you're pre-qualified to do something doesn't mean you're approved to do it. So my advice, again, let's talk to local mortgage brokers so that way we can work together. One of the things I like to tell people is when you work with a smaller team, a lot of times they are going to give you better attention because what they're able to do is they're able to, for lack of a better word, you're not just a number to them. You're not just a transaction in a checkbox. You're important to them because what they're making from you, they're paying their bills. So that's the second most important thing you can do. Go out, find a quality loan officer or mortgage broker that's going to help you go from step 1 through step 2, and then we're going to run into step 3, which the mortgage broker is going to talk to you about. Okay, so now we're at step 3. So we've already gone through step 1, which was know your scores. You got your scores where they needed to be. We jumped into finding a quality loan officer, which now you've gone through the lending process, and you can start going through. The lender has given you a series of numbers now, and we need to start identifying funds, where your funds are, where they're coming from. So the lender should have already told you what your down payment should look like, right? So you've identified the type of loan that you're getting pre-qualified for or pre-approved for, and now you've got that money set aside in a bank account, ready to go. The other deposits, so when we're ready to write an offer, you're going to have 2 deposits in hand. Well, depending on if you're in North Carolina or South Carolina, but you have to have 2 deposits in hand. The first deposit is your earnest deposit. The earnest deposit is basically saying, hey, Mr. Seller, I want to buy your house. Here's $2,000. as a deposit that goes to the attorney. The attorney holds that in escrow, and it counts as a credit to your closing. Okay, so if you have a $350,000 house, if you have a $350,000 house and you have a $2,000 earnest deposit, well, now you're having to finance $358,000. Okay, now that generally the earnest deposit is refundable. Generally, not always. There's times where that's not going to be the case. We'll talk about that maybe in another video, but generally that deposit is refundable. The second deposit that we have is a due diligence fee. Now, depending on if you're in North or South Carolina, if you're in North Carolina, it's a due diligence fee. That money is written directly to the seller. So, Mr. Seller, here is another check for $2,000. That goes directly to the seller. The seller puts it in his bank account. Okay. Now, it is still a credit on your closing statement. So we talked about, now you've had a $350,000 house. You put down $2,000 as a earnest deposit, and you put down another $2,000 as a due diligence fee. Well, now that's $4,000. You're not financing $350,000 anymore. You're financing $356,000. So the due diligence fee is not refundable. So what the due diligence fee does is it basically says, hey, Mr. Seller, I need X amount of time, which you and I will negotiate. I need X amount of time to make sure that I have all the inspections complete that I need to complete in order to make sure I still want to carry through with the purchase of the home. South Carolina is a little different. So South Carolina, there is a termination fee, which acts as a due diligence fee only if you cancel your contract during the due diligence period. So think about it like this. It's basically saying, hey, it's the honor system. That's a great way to put it. It's just the honor system. So it's basically saying, hey, on our contract, if I back out of this, I'm going to pay you $2,000. So it is what it is, right? So both the earnest fee and the due diligence fees are both negotiable. Okay. They're absolutely negotiable. We come up with what we see in the market, and then you, as the seller or the buyer, you make the decision on what you want to offer. Now, I can give you advice and tell you what I think, but ultimately I can't tell you what to offer in order to get a home. I can tell you what I see. The other monies that you're going to have set aside are money for inspections. Now, inspections can go anywhere from as low as $500 all the way up to, I've seen people up to $2,000 or $3,000 for inspections, right? So you're going to get a home inspector to come in and check they're going to check the roof. They're going to check the systems in the home. They're going to check septic tanks is a separate one. Wells, if you have a well. So those things can get costly. In South Carolina, we're required to do or to either do or waive a termite inspection. So that way we can make sure that there's nothing wrong with the home as it relates to wood destroying organisms such as termites or fungus. The only other thing that you have to really worry about, is closing costs. Now, closing costs can be as little as 1.5% to 2% of your loan, all the way up to 5%. I always use that as estimates because we don't know. Because what the closing costs basically are is everything other than your down payments and your down payment and your earnest money, everything that's required to close a loan. That includes prepaid taxes, HOAs. It would include things such as your title insurance, your attorney costs, et cetera, et cetera. So again, that's going to be generally your closing costs and your down payment are your two highest costs, generally speaking. Now, again, the negotiable things are your earnest money and your due diligence. Now, your due diligence, we're going to work to make sure, as a real estate agent, I'm going to work with you to make sure that we get you the longest period of time we can on that. We're going to talk a little bit about, in the next part, we're going to talk a little bit about the things that your realtor will do for you. But what I will say to you is making sure that you have all the funds accessible and set aside, and I think we can call it liquid. Making sure you have those funds ready to go is critically important to the success of your transaction, and your lender is going to tell you the same thing. So we've got through 3 steps now. We've identified our funds, we've got our loan officer, and we have our scores. Now it's time to hire a realtor. Good a time as any to introduce myself. I'm Jack Coleman. I'm with eXp Realty. I run the Coleman team with eXp Realty. We're licensed in North and South Carolina and the Charlotte metro region. So we are happy to help you with all your real estate needs. So if you're looking to buy, sell, or maybe you're relocating, our contact information is right below. I'm happy to help any way that I can. Let's jump into why you want to hire a great realtor. So let's talk about hiring a realtor and something that's changed maybe since the last time you thought about purchasing a home. So really the most important thing you can do is hire an agent. Real estate agents, there's a lot of us out there, but it's important for you to interview several agents and have conversations to talk through what's important to you and make sure they have their process in place that's going to help you have the most effective and efficient home buying purchase that you can possibly have. So what's changed between the last time you maybe purchased a home or thought about buying a home and today? In 2024, the National Association of Realtors settled a lawsuit that originated in Missouri that really, honestly, had nothing to do with the Carolinas. What they were alleging in that lawsuit, we were already doing. But regardless, what it requires, one of the things that it requires, it requires that for me to be able to show you a home, we have to have a buyer agency agreement. So why is a buyer agency agreement important? So the first thing it does, you and I negotiate my fee. The second thing that it does, and probably the most important thing that it does, it is our contract to work together. You're basically saying you're going to work for me, and I'm saying to you, I'm going to work for you, and I'm going to act as a fiduciary for you. Now, when I act as a fiduciary, what that basically means is that anything that you tell me is our little secret. I have to make sure that your confidentiality and your best interest is met no matter what. Even if it's not in my best interest, I have to make sure that your best interest is met. So it's important that you sign the agency agreements. Now, I encourage you to read through them. I encourage you to make sure if you have any questions of your agent that you ask those questions. But the reality is that we're trained to understand our marketplace. We've got all the resources and we've been negotiating deals for years that's going to help you move to the right spot. So again, check out reviews, make sure you have conversations, meet with your potential agents because you're hiring these folks to help you with probably the most expensive purchase that you've ever made in your life up to this point. So I think it's important that you click. I think it's important that they have a process in place. So for example, our process is we're going to sit with you and we're going to go through the entire process of talking about what you want, what you need, where you want it, the things that are important to you, and making sure that all the stakeholders are in place. And then we're going to make sure we send you as much information as we can for you to make a good choice. The home buying, when we get out to start looking for a home, which we'll talk about in the next link, but that should not take the longest. We should really be able to find you a good, nice home that meets your needs within a very small window of time. Because if I'm listening to you as your agent and you're being honest with me, we're communicating and we're making sure that the houses that you're seeing are houses that you want to see. So it's important that you hire a realtor. You're going to have to sign an agency agreement. And what I would say to you is, if there's an agent out there that's willing to show you homes where they aren't having you sign an agency agreement, they're either one, not a realtor, which that's possible, or two, they're just breaking the law. And I would not want to do business with someone that's not going to be honest. So, or that's going to be dishonest in that respect. So anyway, agency agreements are required now. So interview your agent, make sure you're looking at their reviews and make sure you click with them because you're going to be spending some time with them. So now what time is it? So it's time to go house hunting. So we have a process with our team that we sit down and we do a buyer interview. So what we're going to ask you are questions along the lines of, tell me about the house. Tell me what you're looking for. If you had an ideal home, what do you want and why is that important? And we're going to go through and we're going to, for lack of a better term, we're going to build a profile on you. And we're going to build a opportunity for me to send you the houses that you want to see. And we're going to go out and look at houses. So our specific process, what we do is we're not going to go out and see more than 3 to 5 houses every time. Because once you get past 3 to 5 houses, you don't remember anything that's going on. So if we pick out 3 to 5 houses to go look at, we're going to go and we're going to go look at them. Now, we may drive past the house where you're like, hey, why didn't we go see that one? And I would tell you that it's because it didn't make your list. And if it didn't make your list, we're gonna know why. We're gonna have that understanding. So we're gonna go house hunting. We're gonna look in the areas that you've identified. And once we get to that point to where we have found the new home that you want to purchase, now comes the next step, which is actually you and I sitting down, going through the terms of the contract to make sure that we are able to purchase the home at the terms that you need it to be at. Before we jump into that next step, which is writing the contract, what I want to talk about is knowing your timetable. So I have worked with people to where we have been able to find them a home in a very short period of time. I've gone out and written contracts for folks, which it's the first house that I've ever shown them. I've also been in situations where I've worked with clients for some time, and it's because the timetables are different. So one of the things that you should understand is what's your timetable. If you have a lease that's expiring in 3 months, well, we need to find you a house within 45 days because that gives you another 45 days to close and move. If you've got a lease that's expiring in 6 months, 8 months, 10 months, that's going to be a little bit of a different window unless you're willing to break your contract. So those are going to be things that are your lease or rental agreement. Those are going to be things we talk about. The longest I've ever worked with somebody, they were moving from California. They had several trips that they had to make to come and visit and look and identify where they wanted to be. And we were with them every step of the way. So understand your timetable is going to impact the home search. The other piece that I would say about the timetable is understand the market. Have questions for your real estate agent about what's changing inside of the market and what kind of market it is. So for example, if you are slow to pull the trigger on a home in a market that is geared toward a seller's market, then the home that you love, you may not get. So I always ask questions of my clients to say, if you woke up tomorrow and this house was no longer on the market, would you be disappointed? And if the answer to that question is yes, I would be devastated. We probably should work hard to write the offer, which we're going to talk about next. So now it's time to write the offer. So there's several things inside of an offer that are up for negotiation. The primary things I'm going to talk about here is we talked about up at the top too. We talked about price. We talked about your earnest money, your due diligence deposit, or your termination fee, and the timetable that you're going to get all that due diligence done. We get to choose as the buyer, we get to choose the attorney. We get to negotiate concessions. So if you would like the seller to help you with closing costs, then this is the spot where we would talk about that. We also have the choice of the closing date. So as the seller or as the buyer, you get to choose those things, or you get to put those things out there for negotiation. Now, quick thing here, a good real estate agent, we're going to have an understanding of what's important to the seller before we write the offer. So I always make it a habit of having a conversation with the listing agent before I write an offer. So that way I can understand what's important to that seller. So that way, if we get to a point where we're potentially in a multiple offer situation, we may be able to have a better opportunity because we're going to have a conversation and we're going to listen. So once we make the offer, at that point in time, the seller gets the document. So we come up with what do we want to offer. We put pen to paper, North Carolina, South Carolina. We have different contracts. We're going to send over the documents that we have to sign, which include the offer to purchase, and then any disclosures, residential property disclosures. In North Carolina, you have mineral oil, lead-based paint disclosures in the event that the home is a little bit older. Any other disclosures depending on loan product. We're going to send that over to the seller. Now, at that point in time, we've kicked the ball over to the seller. The seller has to make a decision on if they're going to accept the offer, if they're going to reject the offer, or if they're going to counter. Okay? So now what we're doing is we're sitting back and waiting on that. So we do have the option of putting a timeline to say, hey, we need to know by X amount of time if you're going to accept our offer. And if they don't, we can move on. Now, it depends on if you love the house or not, right? I feel different ways about that kind of stuff. So I think that it's important, again, that you sit down with your agent and you have a conversation. Is if you're going to put a timeline, why is that important and what do you hope to gain from it? So that is really the quick 7 steps. Now, there's going to be more things that we talk about that we put into this bucket as we're going out and looking at homes and as we're growing and developing your buy box. The reality is that the home buying process is just that. It's a process. It's repeatable. So our job is to make sure that we take you from point 1 all the way down to our 7th point that we talked about, and make sure that we get you there fast, efficient, and we get you the house that you're looking for. Got it? What kind of questions do you have? Comment below. We'd love to answer any questions that you may have about the home buying process. One of the things I always try to put out there is that we don't know what's going to happen in 2025. We don't know what's going to happen in 2026 or to fill out the rest of the decade. But what I would tell you is the best predictor of the future is the past. And right now we're coming out of a couple of pretty difficult years from a home buying perspective in terms of cost and in terms of interest rates. I fully expect interest rates are going to come down some, not greatly, but prices are going to continue to rise. That's what the experts are saying, up to between 1% and 3%. So depending on where you are, I really think Charlotte's going to be a little bit higher than that. But regardless, at the end of the day, the most important thing that of all the things that we have to talk about for you buying a house in 2025 is making the decision to do it. So we appreciate your time. Let's talk soon.